protections on that. They don't want to let that happen. China's New World Trade Order. People are talking about how we need to cozy up with China. And this is a Globe and Mail op-ed. I think that's pretty crazy. So we'll look at that this morning in the context of tariffs. Conor McGrégor gives Ireland an ultimatum. They have until the end of the month before Conor McGregor is not going to be happy. So it's interesting because he's a UFC guy, right? He's a fighting kind of guy. So we'll see how that all plays out with regards to how the politics of it happen. Chandra Arya is disqualified from running as a Liberal. It's not surprising, but Mark Carney is taking out any of his competition, except for Chrystia Freeland, who obviously wouldn't do that because he's the godfather to her children, or a child of hers. So wild and crazy stuff. There's a lot of stuff to talk about with regards to the election. The campaign is underway, even though the writ hasn't dropped, even though it hasn't been announced yet. The soft announcement has happened, I guess, and Sunday's going to be the election call. Fingers crossed, maybe. That's what the rumors are anyway. And so we've got politicians, Mark Carney, Pierre Poilievre, Maxime Bernier are all starting up the election engines. And so we're off to the races, kind of, sort of. So we'll see how that works out. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. Kirk says, by the way, China's 100% tariffs on Canada's canola oil and 25% on duty on pork and seafood went into effect today. Why is no one talking about this? And that's super interesting. Yeah, nobody is talking about this. Isn't it impactful? Don't people care? I guess not. Very interesting. And nobody is paying attention. Certainly not the media, certainly not the premiers. But when the Trump tariffs were imposed, everybody and their dog was talking about it. So that's really strange. The food professor says, to end our trade war with China, all we need to do is rescind the decision made in October to tariff imported Chinese EVs, which we don't even import yet. It could save many of our farmers and harvesters, but Ottawa isn't even talking about it. Why? Because they don't care? Because they're not interested? Because they're not interested in helping anybody or doing anything to lift a finger to protect the West at all? That would be why, I think. And am I surprised? No, I can't say I'm surprised. And I think that Ottawa wants these trade wars. I think it helps the Liberals. And then they can pretend to be the strong man, and then they get a strong mandate, and then they don't do anything for 4 years. And by the end of the 4 years, we've all forgotten what the crisis was that we didn't want them to handle. And there are multiple new crises now, which is the situation we're under now. David Mulrooney says Canada should mend its ties with China to build a new world trade order, according to the Globe and Mail opinion piece. This is business opinions. China's execution of Canadians over drug offenses have shocked and disappointed us. What? The whole thing is crazy. And we talked about that yesterday, but it's interesting that they're doing kind of sanitization for China. Wild and crazy stuff. The Globe and Mail is reporting City of Toronto bars staff from using American rideshare companies such as Uber. So the only response to the U.S. tariffs at this point in time is to not allow Canadians to use American companies. We haven't seen any of our leaders do anything meaningful to stop these tariffs at all. And that's notable. That's very notable. Doug Ford's toned down the talk of, I'm going to turn off the electricity. I haven't heard anything like that. Other than that, there hasn't been anything. And it's really, really strange because we keep getting these reprieves. And then I talked to somebody the other day, yesterday, and they said, it's probably not going to happen in April either because, it would destroy the economy. Like, yeah, but if Trump comes into April and doesn't enforce these tariffs, I think that we're going to see, like, he's going to lose some teeth there. It's going to seem very toothless, right? We're going to do these tariffs soon, but not really. And so is this all just a trade negotiation? Maybe. It really might be. Let's move into the election stuff. And Danielle Smith is talking about meeting with Mark Carney. He was in Alberta yesterday, and they removed Chandra Arya from being eligible to run as a Liberal, and because they want Mark Carney to run in his riding. Isn't that crazy? Wild. Danielle Smith, as far as I understand it, that's how it's being not reported, but that's what people are talking about. Anyway, Danielle Smith says, at his request, Mark Carney's request, I met with Prime Minister Mark Carney today. We had a very frank discussion in which I made it clear that Albertans will no longer tolerate the way that we've been treated by the federal Liberals over the past 10 years. I provided a specific list of demands the next Prime Minister, regardless of who that is, must address within the first 6 months of their term to avoid an unprecedented national unity crisis. This includes guaranteeing Alberta full access to oil and gas corridors to the north, east, and west, Repealing Bill C-69, also known as the No Pipelines Act, lifting the tanker ban off the BC coast, eliminating the oil and gas emissions cap, which is a production cap, scrapping the so-called clean energy regulations cap, or scrapping the clean energy regulations. And sorry, I'll mention here, I've got the tab for you later in this series, but Mark Carney has already said that he's going to go ahead with the emissions and production cap. Ending the prohibition on single-use plastics, abandoning the net zero car mandate, returning oversight of the industrial carbon tax to the provinces, halting the federal censorship of energy companies. I also made it clear that Alberta is owner of the resources, will not accept an export tax or a restriction of Alberta's oil and gas to the United States, and that our province is no longer agreeable to subsidizing other large provinces who are fully capable of funding themselves. Lastly, I made it clear that the federal mismanagement of Jasper and Banff National Parks resulted in last year's tragic wildfire in Jasper and is endangering Banff, and the situation must be rectified immediately. With the federal election about to be called, I encourage all Albertans to get involved in what is likely one of the most pivotal and important elections in our national history, and to support the party and candidates that have consistently advocated for freeing Alberta from federal overreach and the repeated economic attacks our province has faced from Ottawa over the last 10 years. So no word on how he took that. Did he hulk out, right? Did he get angry and yell at people and they had to cut that part of the interview? I guess it wasn't published. Mark Carney has had a anti-taxer says Mark Carney had a 24 jersey made because he's the 24th prime minister, you see. And so that's weird. He's been the 24th prime minister unelected for 6 days. Think about the character of a man who does that. Yeah, it's really weird. It's really, really strange. James Snell says Mark Carney refuses the Wall Street online news question on assets and potential conflicts of interest Canadians need to know before the election. Here is the Western Standard Online, and he's asking a question and he gets no answer. Here we go.
Mr. Prime Minister, welcome to Edmonton. When are you going to reveal your assets to Canadians and talk about potential conflicts of interest? We greatly appreciate it.
That's how serious Mark Carney takes this. No answers. And he's got that huge motorcade too. Isn't that crazy? Just a quick side note. I've been streaming on X for the last week and a half or something like that. And usually within the first few minutes of my stream, I have 20 or 30 viewers. And then after that, I have, up to 60, 80 viewers within the time period that I stream. And today I have 0. There's 0 viewers, and nobody's showing up. Apparently, I guess nobody likes my show. That's okay. It's all right. We're doing it for the usual uploads anyway. But I just thought I'd mention it because it's so drastically odd. Maybe one of the commenters in my show yesterday was correct. Anyway, David Jacobs says Carney is dripping with condescension. This is the end of a 3-minute diatribe against a reporter.
I'll take that as a no then.
No, you'll take that as a very comprehensive answer to your question.
I'll take that.
Here's the question, and we'll listen to a lot of this because Carney just kind of goes off, and I don't know that he doesn't answer the question. The reporter frames it. It's a weird question. The reporter sounds kind of young, but Carney goes off and basically says this problem was Donald Trump's problem. Donald Trump did this. He's the mean guy who did this. And the reporter corrects him, but it's interesting. Back and forth is interesting. Mark Carney's out of touch and elitist, and we'll see. We'll see how this all plays out.
Next question.
Prime Minister, thanks for taking my question and welcome to Edmonton. And James from the Western Standard. You recently...
Sorry about the microphone.
Yeah, no problem. I'm a pretty tall guy. You have not been elected in a federal election yet, and you recently flew to Europe on government wide-body jet at the expense of at least $500,000. So the question I have for you today, and maybe I'll say this before I ask the question, these people around you all paid for that flight, and you've not been elected yet. So will you commit to refunding these taxpayers for that flight?
Well, it's an interesting question, way of framing it. Look, and I'm going to go back to... I'm going to allude to the question that was asked previously by Mr. Staples from the Journal and the situation that we're in as a country, which is we are in an economic crisis that's brought on. Sorry, I'm going to answer the question. Brought on by the tariffs that have been put on Canada, actual and prospective. One of the challenges.
The economic crisis was brought on by former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and you were his advisor at the time.
I think you would find. I think you would.
These people did not create that problem.
I certainly. Hey, nobody in Canada created that problem. Nobody in Canada created that problem. The U.S. government has decided to put tariffs on all of its closest allies. All of its closest allies. I wouldn't for a moment suggest that anyone in Canada is the cause of this. What our responsibility is to take action to react to a different world that we're in. And part of the way we do that is we build out new partnerships, new opportunities, including opportunities. And I'm going to give you a specific one, and then I don't know if you have one more follow-up, but I'll give you a specific example. It goes to my previous answer, something I also discussed with the Premier this morning, which is Canada has many advantages, and one of them is in critical metals and minerals. One of the issues is how are we going to develop the trade routes and the trade corridors rapidly in order to export those critical metals and minerals? And who are our clients for that? Who are our customers? Do we only have one customer to the south of us, the customer that's attacking us, that doesn't respect the trade agreements that they signed? Or should we develop new customers? New customers in Europe. What's required, if I may, what's required for those new customers is to build out trade corridors and infrastructure, including what I referenced in my previous answer and discussed with the Premier, is the potential to go north, go to new deepwater ports. Churchill is an example, Gray's Point in Nunavut as another. And that creates a whole new set of opportunities for Albertans as a whole, for people across the country, for these hardworking people around me and those like them in the trades. And that's what my job is.
I'll take that as a no then.
No, you'll take that as a very comprehensive answer to your question.
I just think it's important to see, thank you, next question, the temperament of Mark Carney. I mean, he's very close to getting angry, right? And you wouldn't like him when he's angry. So the question was, are you going to reimburse taxpayers for the tour you took, the useless tour you took around Europe, because you wasted $500,000 in jet fuel for nothing and you're unelected? And the answer was a pivot to talk about how Donald Trump is super duper mean and we're going to do some stuff to help people out and so on and so forth. It was basically a stump speech in response to the question, are you going to reimburse taxpayers for your trip around Europe as prime minister? The answer is no, right? And then I just thought he was condescending as all get out, right? Here's Ryan. He says, the future of Canada, this is in the same interview, and he's talking about building modular homes. Do you want modular homes? I don't think modular homes are the solution. Here's Mark Carney again.
Housing supply up. In fact, we need to double housing supply on an annual basis. We need to get that supply up so we can bring costs down. We need to build more at a faster pace. So my government will stimulate innovation and productivity and sustainability by promoting new technologies such as modular and prefabricated homes that speed up completion times, lower costs for builders and buyers. We're working to remove barriers.
So prefab homes, you're welcome, Canada. This is the solution that Mark Carney, the genius Mark Carney, the international banker Mark Carney has come up with, the same solution that all of the ministers previous to him in housing and immigration, et cetera, have come up with. Same plan. So I thought we voted for change, but here's the other part of this plan. It's a grift for foreign investors. They're going to buy the modular homes to be built in China, probably with their Chinese companies, ship it to Canada, put it together, and build it on the plot of land that they own from China. You see, that's the grift. And Mark Carney wants to give them a tax break for it. Mark Carney says, my government is eliminating the GST on all homes up to $1 million for first-time home buyers. I'm a first-time home buyer in China, and I want to buy a home that is going to be a rental that I own for 25 years, GST-free, right? And that Canadians can live in until I want to immigrate to Canada because I've made so much money I can buy citizenship as a Chinese person, I guess. Here is this guy talking about the scheme.
But I'm working with Carney, surprise, and I'm trying to get a rental program in where people can buy, put it into a 25-year pool, get a preferred rate from CMHC, and let's allow foreign buyers to buy it. They have to rent it out for 25 years, and it'll show the world that we are open for business. But
there you go. So show the world we're open for business. Everybody can buy Canadian property, GST free, and put up slums for Canadians to live in. Yay, prefab slums. We can call them Carneyvilles after Trudeau. CTV News says Carney eliminates GST for first-time homebuyers on homes under $1 million. And far-right Sabrina, not Serbian, says Carney can't do that, which is correct. Maybe he's promising to do that in the future, but he can't do that on his own. So misleading headlines, misleading tweets by news articles or news organizations are not helpful during this election season. Blacklock's reporter says Prime Minister Carney promises no preferential treatment for federal contractor that paid him $9 million in stock options. Let's say there's a major decision that will have an impact on Brookfield. Well, I mean, they're a United States company now. They left Canada, so I don't see how that would be the case, but maybe, right? At least people are thinking about it. But this is an indication of how Mark Carney will deal with it. Canada Proud is reporting Mark Carney has hired former BlackRock manager Mark Wiseman, co-founder of the Century Initiative, as an advisor. The Century Initiative is a lobbying group which aims to use mass immigration to increase Canada's population to 100 million. So I've talked about the Century Initiative before. It's got a former Governor General on the board, and I think they use her staffing money. I think Canadian tax dollars that go to fund former Governor General's pet projects, because they have a $100,000 fund for an office or something like that, which gives you like an office assistant and somebody to stock the office and all the rest of it, right? So you can run this thing, and so I think they use things like that to bolster these Century initiatives, because nobody that I know says, Canada really needs more people from other countries. Like I don't know the right people. I don't know very many people, to be honest with you. I don't talk to very many people. So, what are you going to do? But all the people that I talk to definitely aren't saying that. Chandra Arya says, I've been informed by the Liberal Party that my nomination as the candidate for the upcoming federal election in Neepan has been revoked. Okay, maybe this isn't Carney's thing, although people down here were saying that it is for Carney that they're removing him. But regardless, I'm not sure. I think Carney's looking for an easy riding in Edmonton area. That's what I heard, but who knows? Anyway, back to this. And a Liberal in Edmonton. I don't know that there are any easy ridings in Edmonton, but I think Carney's from Edmonton, so he wants to run, or from Alberta, so he wants to run in Alberta. And Freeland was elected in Alberta, right? So, or was she? Is her riding from Alberta, or is she an Ontario person now? No, she's Toronto, isn't she? But she grew up in Alberta. Apologies, she was a Toronto MP, not an Albertan MP. So I mean, they're going to put Carney wherever he's most likely to win, realistically. But I've heard Carney wants Alberta. Anyway, Chandra Arya says, while the news is deeply disappointing, it does not diminish the profound honor and privilege it's been to serve the people of Neepan and all Canadians as their Member of Parliament since 2015. Over the years, I've poured my heart and soul into this role. I'm immensely proud of the work I've done as a parliamentarian, the unwavering service I've provided to the residents of Neepan, and the principled stands I've taken on issues that matter deeply to Canadians, and the causes I've stood up for, even when it was difficult, even when it came at a personal or political cost. Serving my community and country has been the greatest responsibility of my life, and I remain grateful for every moment of it. So this is the letter from the Liberals removing Chandra. They say, Dear Chandra, I'm writing on behalf of the National Campaign Co-Chair, who has conducted a thorough review of your eligibility to serve as a candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada in the riding of Neepan. After careful consideration based on a review of new information by the chair of the Green Light Committee, the National Campaign Co-Chair is recommending the revocation of your status as a candidate. Unfortunately, based on that recommendation, your status as a candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada has been revoked. I appreciate that this news will come as a disappointment to you and your campaign team. Sincerely, Andrew B. So we know this is disappointing. Bye. That's that. So interesting. They're removing players they don't want on their team, and they're bolstering players who they do. Francois Philippe Champagne was elevated to, I think he's the finance minister now, and he says he's responding to FT, and FT says unlocking Canada's superpower potential, and Francois Champagne says Canada absolutely has potential to be a global superpower. I could not agree more. We will bring the visionary leadership, policy framework, and fiscal responsibility to capitalize on Canada's many advantages, unlocking Canada's superpower potential. And people are pointing out that Canada has the weakest economy in not just the G7, but freaking everywhere, like absolutely everywhere. We're doing terrible. Is that Luxembourg below us? Luxembourg has negative 0.9. So that's, I mean, they're doing worse, but nobody else is doing worse than us. So growth based on GDP per capita in the last 10 years, 0.5% for Canada. So not good, not good. But everybody's saying, oh, everything's great. Well, the people who are paid by taxpayers to manage everything, who have destroyed everything, they're saying everything's great and we're just poised to break out. It's like, oh man, sure aren't. Heather says, Carney will maintain an oil and gas emission cap, environment minister says. I will reiterate that the cap is not compatible with a single new pipeline or LNG facility. So keeping this cap excludes being able to build any new pipelines, which was kind of the cornerstone of, diversifying Canada away from United States trade and protecting ourselves against the potential for a trade war against the United States. At this point in time, that doesn't seem likely at all. And it seems, in fact, very unlikely, right? So that's weird. Alex says, details matter, not talking points. When Mark Carney says that he will build Canada, unless this changes, he can't. He's lying. Nothing has changed. Well, yeah, he's a liar. That's what he does. He says whatever he thinks people will want to hear, and he tells them that. And then that's supposed to be enough, right? Regardless of whether he follows through on it or not. And regardless of whether it's a good idea, he just says what he thinks people want to hear. Here's Sam Cooper. He's exposing the Davos elite behind the next election machine, and they're getting well-known people like Evan Solomon to run for them. And so Sam Cooper says, Mark Wiseman and Evan Solomon noted here, networking analysis is a good predictor. The Carney-Trudeau nexus, how financial elites from Davos to Beijing are shaping Canada's next federal election. So Sam Cooper is talking about the not just the leadership race being impacted, but the rest of it, who the candidates are. I mean, we're seeing already Chandra Arya being removed. We're seeing pieces being moved into place. And I'm sure Evan Solomon, I'm sure other people, I've heard Christy Clark and a couple other Western liberals who called it quits a few years ago are now back in the arena because of Carney asking them to, or something to that effect. Who knows who asked them to, but the Carney machine, right? And so we're seeing new players come in or old players come back. And a lot of this is shaped by who? Davos, Beijing. Sam Cooper's got some insights there. And so that's very interesting and something if you're interested to have a read. Link should be in the description. GM Forbes says Poilievre promised that in October. Mark Carney says my government is eliminating the GST on all homes up to $1 million. And we already talked about that. But the Liberals are stealing a lot of Poilievre's ideas. Here is Poilievre, and he says, only months ago, Liberals voted unanimously against my idea of taking the GST off of new homes. Now, a few days before calling an election, they plagiarize me again. Liberals will never do this policy. They're just trying to trick people into giving them a fourth term. I believe that's accurate. Like, the Liberals are saying whatever they think people want to hear, and then they're not going to actually follow through. When they get government, they'll get a big mandate because people will believe the lies and they won't do it. And people will say, we're so frustrated that the Liberals told us one thing and are doing another. But you have to know that they'll never do what they're saying they're going to do. That flies in the face of their ideology and all of their progress, right? It's pretty interesting. The other day, I reported that Doug Ford said he doesn't know Pierre Poilievre or Mark Carney, and he'd work with either of them. Apparently, that's not true. CFRB 1010 is reporting insiders are saying Pierre Poilievre called Doug Ford for help on Monday and was turned down by the Premier. Toronto Star Queen's Park Bureau Chief Robert Benzie joined Deb Hutton to break down the story. We'll listen to a minute of this. It's interesting. Here we go.
On Monday, Pierre Poilievre, the federal conservative leader, called the premier. This call apparently took a lot of diplomatic wrangling to even arrange, Deb. These two men are not friendly, and their camps are not particularly friendly. But I think there was a realization that they needed to have some sort of a rapprochement, although I don't think this conversation was that. Anyway, Mr. Poilievre, who didn't even send out a tweet the night that the Conservatives won provincially on February 27th, 18 days later, he calls Ford to congratulate him. And the premier, I think welcomed the opportunity to sort of maybe clear the air a little bit. And I think now, in fairness to Mr. Poilievre, he didn't ask for an endorsement or anything like that. He was really calling for the premier's advice and his opinions on how to win in Ontario. I mean, Doug Ford knows how to win in Ontario. He's won 3 majorities in a row, and he just won on February 27th. But I think it tells you, Deb, everything that you need to know, that this call happens on the Monday, and on Tuesday morning, the federal liberal transport minister, Chrystia Freeland, who is a Ford friend, is at Ford's house having coffee, posting selfies of her and the premier together, and then Freeland is at the swearing in on Wednesday. So the federal conservatives are really, I think, discouraged by that. I think they felt that, it's not like they're looking that they expect Doug Ford to actually help them in any significant way, but even though he's saying he's staying neutral and trying to stay out of it, he's had photo ops with Mark Carney, the prime minister, and he's inviting Chrystia Freeland, a federal liberal minister, to the swearing in of a progressive conservative cabinet, which seems to be a first, if in my view. You and I have been around a lot of these swearing in. I don't remember federal people from a different party coming.
Right. So interesting. And you can see the picture of Chrystia Freeland and Doug Ford. It's like, okay, all right. Weird, right? Here is Maxime Bernier, the rumors last week where he was going on some pretty high profile podcasts in Florida and Texas. This is the Florida one, as far as I understand it. Patrick Bet David, he's got 1.4 million followers, 1.3 million, 488 followers, 1.3 million followers. And he says, I respect any candidate who is not afraid of sitting down with anyone. Trump won in 24 because he was fearless. Kamala was afraid and asked for questions in advance. Just had a great sit down with Maxime Bernier from Canada. Fearless and extremely impressive. So there you go. Maxime Bernier is doing that. And rumors are that he's going to do Rogan this week, I guess, maybe. The New Right says Maxime Bernier rumored to appear on Joe Rogan's podcast later this week. So he was going to do that circuit. And that's great gets for the PPC team. Honestly, like those are high profile, and that will expose Bernier to a lot of Canadians that may never have seen him before. And here's Kian Bexty, and this made me howl. This made me laugh. Like and repost this, says Kian, if you want to see Pierre Poilievre go on Joe Rogan before Canada heads to the polls. So, they've been caught. And I guess buying all the Canadian media isn't enough, right? You've got to get on Joe Rogan now too, Poilievre. The food professor says total carbon tax elimination expected to save farmers millions. So this is kind of in the realm of the election, because economically this is the Liberals backing off on one thing, hitting a pause, not replacing it with anything until maybe after the election when they win, and then they'll screw us with the industrial carbon tax, right? But yeah, removal of the carbon tax. If you have if instead of having to drive to work, you have a tractor that you have to put gasoline into, and you have, I don't know, however many acres of farm to do, and you have to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, right? You've got to hit all of those acres with your tractor. Then that's costly in gasoline. I know farms that have their own tank of fuel, and they have a fuel pump so they can refuel they don't have to take their farm equipment off the property in order to refuel it. And then they have a tanker truck that comes in, and they have to pay the tanker truck for gas. So it's convenient that way, right? And like gas gets old. You can't just leave gas sitting there for 6 months or 12 months or something like that. You have to actually use that gas. So like, this is a cost that is directly impacting food. Absolutely, right? And I don't know if the other carbon tax is on propane heaters. That's not great. Like that's, if the industrial carbon tax is on propane heaters when they have to dry the grain and stuff, that's not good. So we're in a situation where, yes, this money is going to help the farmers, but it's also going to lessen the urgency for people to get the Liberals out. Now, I don't know that anybody in the West really is going to be voting for Liberal unless you live in a city, right? And you don't farm or anything like that. So if you've got any kind of, if you have any family who owns a farm, if you have any connection to a farm, you're going to know about this. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting play on manipulating people, right? We're just gonna remove this thing and then not talk about what we're replacing it with until after the election. Sabrina says the People's Party of Canada strongly supports lawful gun ownership in Thunder Bay, Rainy River, and across Canada, as it is a fundamental aspect of our Canadian values and heritage. The gun bans proposed by the Liberals in Canada are not genuinely focused on safety, but rather highlighting the Liberals and Marcus Pulowski's inability to effectively represent their constituents and defend lawful gun ownership in Thunder Bay, Rainy River. The People's Party of Canada is the only party that will champion lawful gun ownership. So there you go. Got an election underway, and everybody is getting in on the pre-election electioneering. And so it's interesting to watch. Maxime Bernier's getting on podcasts that are extremely effective. Mr. Polyev is getting shut down by Doug Ford, and Mr. Carney is chastising CBC reporters, which you think would play well, but Mark Carney's terrible. So he's just awful. Just terrible. And this is a good time to turn off the stream because I keep forgetting and I keep letting it run to 40 minutes. So apologies about that. Thanks for watching, everybody, on the stream. And we got up to 19 people, which is half or a third of what the usual audience is. But I'm a little early today, so maybe that's what it is. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll catch you. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful